If a criminal fugitive can run over a cop with his car and walk free, why do you get charged for trying to escape an angry mob? Try to stop a car with your body and you might get killed. Just sit down in the road and you'll get run over. Yelling freedom of speech is not the shield of invincibility you might think it is. Bad behavior gets people killed, and recent examples are going to require the law to side with the driver, not the disruptor. No, I'm not a lawyer, just an observer, but it's becoming obvious someone's going to get run over and the driver won't be charged. It's just logic, and governments agree. Florida Sheriff Wayne Ivey recently made headlines with some plain talk.
We invite people to share their opinions. If you let it turn violent, you do not want to do that in Brevard County. If you block an intersection or a roadway, you are going to jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street.
That's not a threat, it's a warning of your legal risks. And it reflects Florida law, common sense, and castle doctrine. Even if you have a duty to retreat, the only way to retreat in your car is to drive away. Governor Ron DeSantis has said the same. Motorists have rights. Protesters don't get to suspend the rights of others just because they're waving a sign. The public has been operating under a false assumption that drivers must yield to these mobs, that because pedestrian right-of-way laws exist, you have to sit there and take it. But those laws are for people crossing a street, not for political stunts. The protesters' right to free speech doesn't include the right to force others to listen, or worse, to obey them. The First Amendment protects their right to speak, not to detain you unlawfully. That's kidnapping. Real protest allows you to express your views. It doesn't allow you to hijack someone else's daily commute. When drivers are surrounded and are threatened, the law must recognize that they may be forced to act simply out of self-preservation. And we'll show you cases of drivers who acted without any excuse, and the person who got rammed, not the driver, was the one charged. Let's walk through this by date. 1992, the LA Rodney King riots. The lesson here is not about drivers getting away with anything. It's about what happens when they don't keep moving. These riots show exactly why stopping is dangerous. Time and again, the victims were those who stopped, and they paid the price. The best known is Reginald Denny. In 1992, during the LA riots, he slowed down for a mob at Florence and Normandy streets, and he was pulled out of his truck and was brutally attacked with a brick and an oxygen tank, while a news helicopter recorded it live. The attackers danced over his bleeding body, mocking him and humiliating him. It was attempted murder on TV. But Denny was just one of many victims. Ask Choi Sai-Choi, a Hong Kong immigrant. The legal kind. Same riots, same intersection. Dragged from his car and beaten. Again, he stopped and he paid for it. Tam Tran, a 34-year-old Vietnamese woman, was robbed after being struck in the head with a brick while driving. Larry Tarvin was stopped and beaten while trying to deliver medical supplies. Sylvia Castillo was attacked, but she managed to speed away. But Fidel Lopez, a construction worker, stopped and was dragged out of his truck, robbed, stripped naked, and had his face and genitals spray-painted black. There's no ambiguity here. The attacks were brutal and racially charged lynchings. But to the credit of the same community, some brave locals intervened. They pulled victims to safety and got them to hospitals. But the police, meanwhile, were huddled in the station. The LAPD chief was at a fundraiser. Most precinct captains were attending a seminar. Mob rule filled the void. When there's a riot, you just might be on your own. And LA isn't the only example. Another case is in 2014, Detroit. Blue-collar worker Steve Utash stopped when a boy ran into the road and struck his pickup truck. He got out to help and was mobbed by dozens and beaten into a coma. 6 were identified and went to trial. 1 man went to prison, the rest got probation. What would you do in his position, knowing what happened to him? In 1992 Los Angeles, what would have happened if the third driver to come along had just rammed the protesters? Would they put him in jail while Denny was in the hospital? We don't have a perfect modern example of a motorist driving through protesters and getting off scot-free. But here's the twist: we don't need one. Why? Because the examples we do have are even more extreme. Motorists who rammed people with no reason, and the people who were rammed were held accountable, not the drivers. Who are these drivers? They are people, criminals, who aggressively rammed police officers, and the law bent over backwards to excuse them. Take Takia Young, 2023, Blendon Township, Ohio. She stole a bag full of liquor, get this, while pregnant. Then she sat in her car with no plates in a handicapped spot, sounds like a lovely person, doesn't she? Refusing to comply with the police who tried to question her. Instead of answering their questions, she rammed them with the car. She flew across the parking lot, putting others in danger with her behavior. They'll tell you a car can be a weapon, and she was using her car as a weapon. So the officer fired his gun and killed her. Final result? The cop is now charged with 2 counts of murder and manslaughter. Quick break, then back to it. If you want the full story, uncut and unfiltered, subscribe to the 10th Man podcast. It's where we say what can't be said here. Next, there's Dennis Guider from Chicago Heights. In 2021, with an outstanding warrant for forgery, when the car he was riding in was stopped by police, he forced the woman driving out of the driver's seat, just shoved her into the street. He seized the wheel and rammed Officer Patrick McCarty, who was standing in front, ordering him to stop. McCarty was thrown onto the hood, driven 50 miles per hour, then flung into a ditch, breaking his back.
Stop the car, man! Stop the car! Stop the car! Put on the brakes!
The result? Oh, Guider was charged, but the judge blamed Officer McCarty. The judge said Dennis Guider wasn't a murderer, therefore the cop should have just stepped aside. If the cop had stepped aside, none of this would have happened. Think that over. Unless you're a cop stopping a murderer, you have to step out of the way of a moving car. Sounds like a legal precedent, doesn't it? If criminals who violently ram police officers are met with excuses and sympathy, then surely a motorist trying to escape a threatening mob deserves at least as much consideration. If the law protects criminals, how can it condemn someone simply trying to survive? That brings us to 2 recent cases in, you guessed it, Los Angeles. Same place 3 decades later. In the summer of 2025, during yet another wave of street riots, 2 different motorists found themselves trapped by a mob, just like Reginald Denny. But unlike Denny, these motorists tried to flee and accidentally struck and injured one of the mob, blocking each of them, who only needed to get out of the way, but they deliberately chose to be injured instead. One driver was later identified and charged with assault. The other fled the scene and is being hunted down for felony hit and run. Let that sink in. They were just trying to retreat from the violence, and remember, the only way to retreat in a car is to drive away. But LA never learns. It protects the criminals and punishes the people just trying to get home. But even in LA, it's still better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. The motorists may be charged, but at least no one got to beat them with a brick, an oxygen tank, and a hammer like the same rioters did in 1992. They can wait trial at home, not in the hospital. Rioters aren't protesters. Blocking traffic is an attack, not free speech. And you have a right to get where you're going without fear for your safety.